let me tell you the story of Ubisoft Montreal. The year was 1997. French company Ubisoft was starting to grow bigger from their humble PC roots in the 80s to moving on to consoles starting in the 90s. And while I have no clue what hits they had during this early period, one game that I do know became a hit, and it became a massive hit. That of course was the first Rayman game. Debuting on the Atari Jaguar first and then a few days later for PlayStation, it would be the PlayStation port that would absolutely rule in Europe, and specifically would become the best-selling game on the PlayStation in the United Kingdom alone. Yes, you heard me right, the best-selling game, outbeating the likes of Gran Turismo, Crash Bandicoot, and Tomb Raider. Ubisoft was pleased to finally have their own Mario, until they decided that they just didn't want him anymore, but I digress. Getting back on track, there was just one problem with Rayman's release that didn't sit right with Ubisoft. Rayman wasn't that big of a hit in the United States. Despite the PlayStation release hitting the US first, America just didn't find much appeal in this limbless dude compared to other PlayStation releases. Ubisoft did publish a few games in the States before Rayman, but it was clear that a few unremarkable titles weren't going to cut it anymore. So following Ubisoft's launch of their initial public offering, they got enough money out of investors to open up a few extra studios around the world, such as Shanghai, Milan, and of course, Montreal. The Montreal location was very important for Ubisoft to gain a hold of the United States market, as they A, had a studio very close to the country, and B, located in an area that spoke French, making it easy for their French-speaking employees to come to the country to work at the studio. And with that, it was time to pump out all the hits, such as Speedbusters, The Jungle Book Groove Party, and who can forget their first game, Laura's Happy Adventures. Yeah, so at this time, Ubisoft Montreal wasn't exactly producing classics. In fact, when the studio started, there were about 50 employees. About half of them came from Ubisoft's Paris headquarters, and the rest? Yeah, they had no clue how to even develop software. The founding myth of the studio is that we took a bunch of young people, we gave them PCs, and we said, make games. They were absolutely not game developers at the time. They didn't know how to make a game whatsoever. At all. But the overall goal of the studio was taking a bunch of unskilled developers and turning them into competent ones as time would roll forward. But it's really hard to show how much you've improved if all you're releasing are licensed games based around Donald Duck. But then in 2002, everything would change. Because that would be the year Ubisoft Montreal would release Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. There's a lot more to the story of Splinter Cell that I'm going to save for the eventual GameCube port I gotta review, but to sum up the story real fast, Ubisoft dissolved a New York studio working on a stealth game in 1999, and relocated them to the Montreal location. In 2000, Ubisoft would buy novelist Tom Clancy's game studio, Red Storm Entertainment, giving them complete rights to the Tom Clancy name. So the new Montreal team took the game they were working on, slapped the Tom Clancy name on it, and as a result would create a game slated to be a Metal Gear Solid killer for the OG Xbox. And the result turned out more than successful, as Splinter Cell would become one of the highest praised games of 2002 and one of the big reasons besides Halo to own an OG Xbox. And from there the big games kept rolling out. The Prince of Persia reboot, Far Cry, more Tom Clancy games, Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, For Honor. It felt like any AAA title Ubisoft released in the last 20 years were responsible by them. I mean, wasn't this the same studio that made that throwaway Tarzan game? Now here they are, making big name hits and even sleeper hits like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the Game and Child of Light. That's honestly insane to me. But before their big breakthrough in critical and financial success, they were still the studio responsible for a lot of Ubisoft's licensed games and usual shovelware. As we return to 2001, where they would make two games that would end up as launch titles for the GameCube, with Disney's Tarzan Untamed and Batman Vengeance. I don't think I need to tell you who Batman is, of course, but if you need a briefing, he is of course probably the most popular American superhero ever, created by Bob Kane, and most of the good ideas associated with the character created by Bill Finger, who sadly went uncredited for more than half a century. Bruce Wayne, millionaire playboy industrialist, after seeing the death of his parents at a young age, vowed to stop criminal scum as his alter ego, Batman, a brooding crime stopper dressed as a bat with a handful of gadgets in his utility belt, stopping foes like the Joker, the Penguin, and the Riddler. And of course got its start within the realm of comic books going all the way back to 1939, and going even stronger to this day. But much like any lucrative comic made during the golden age of comics, media corporations were willing to take the bat into new on-screen productions, like two 15-episode film serials in 1943 and 1949, released by Columbia Pictures, and a live-action TV show running for 3 seasons in 1966. Probably the most important piece of media surrounding Batman would be the 1989 movie released by Warner Brothers and directed by Tim Burton. Before this, Batman was conceived as a pulpy hero of old, and the 60s television show, probably the biggest piece of Batman media before the 1989 movie, didn't help. But now that was all over. Batman 89 shifted the idea that a man dressed as a bat could be mature and epic, and attracted an audience accepting this new brooding choice. The film turned into a ginormous hit and helped create a new image of Batman going forward, and the result of that came in the form of an animated series in 1992, simply known as Batman the Animated Series. Airing on Fox's Fox Kids block, Batman the Animated Series was groundbreaking in terms of action shows aimed at kids, ditching a lot of the cornier elements of children's animated action shows, as well as realistic character designs for a more unique look and a more mature telling of the Batman series, as well as the many adversaries Batman faced, many of which are more interesting than Batman himself. Not only was the series a visual marvel, but it also proved that you didn't need swearing, blood, and excessive violence to be more badass, and you didn't have to water down media for kids with a comic relief sidekick, catchphrases, or a bunch of goofy jokes. It was an ambitious project and it paid off well, as many look back on it as not one of the greatest animated shows of the 90s, but one of the greatest animated shows of all time. But that's a discussion in the realm of animation. Right now we're in the realm of video games. So what am I doing talking about a 90s television show on a console made during the 2000s? Well, for some reason, Batman Vengeance is an adaptation of Batman the Animated Series, scratch that. Batman Vengence is an adaptation of Batman the Animated Series spin-off / third season, The New Batman Adventures. After Warner Brothers created their own network and alongside that a new children's block, Batman was renewed for more episodes, and this time with a massive makeover compared to the show that came before, with a pitch red sky and a Joker design that makes Jared Leto's design look classic. I'm not sure what the consensus is on this show, whether it be just as good as what came before or kind of a letdown. The series wrapped up only after 24 episodes in one season. Whether it be for low ratings or the production staff looking to move forward, the adventures of Bruce Wayne came to an end for the time being. And in no time flat, another Batman spin-off made its way to air, only this time taking place in the future with a new man taking on the realm of Batman, with Bruce Wayne acting as his mentor called Batman Beyond. It kind of begs the question, why wouldn't Ubisoft choose to adapt this series since it was doing great with 3 seasons? Well, they did. Only it wasn't on any 6th generation console, but on 5th generation for the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, with Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker in the year 2000, based on the direct-to-DVD movie of the same name. And it was a massive bomb, considered one of the worst games of the Nintendo 64 right next to Superman 64. I don't know if this reception kept them from making another Batman Beyond game, but if I had to make a guess, I'd say yes. But I'm also kind of curious if Ubisoft getting the rights to Batman Beyond from Warner Brothers Animation meant they also have the rights to make video games based on any of Batman's recent animated escapades. As in the following year of April of 2001, Ubisoft would publish both Batman Chaos and Gotham for Game Boy Color and Batman Gotham City Racer for PlayStation, both based on the new Batman adventures. Yeah, both of these titles are a little late for the respective consoles' relevance, so that's why we turn our heads to Batman Vengeance, as Ubisoft's venture into the true next-gen Batman experience. Still in the era of licensed games, it is, of course, Ubisoft Montreal who would have the honor of adapting Batman, actually debuting a whole month before their Tarzan game in October of 2001 on the PlayStation 2. Then a month later for the GameCube's launch, Ubisoft would bring it to the titular Cube in November of 2001, and finally an OG Xbox release in the following month of December of 2001. And just so no one's left out, there was also a Game Boy Advance port of Batman Vengeance, of course not at all playing like the console version. I figured this would be worth mentioning as I believe Ubisoft Montreal also developed this game, but with all that build up, it's finally time to see what Batman has to offer in Batman Vengeance. Well, they definitely got the aesthetic of the series down pretty well, with synopsises and writing that feels right out of the show. While I can't seem to find any proof of it, if any writer of Batman the Animated Series worked on this game, I wouldn't be surprised. And who doesn't love the fact they got all the voice actors back to do their iconic roles, with Kevin Conroy as Batman, Mark Hamill as the Joker, and Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn, just to name a few. And every new episode in this game is accompanied by a title card looking very similar to the title cards of the show themselves. Not to mention, the work on the pre-rendered cutscenes in this game is such a treat. They look fantastic, and I'd totally be down to watch a movie animated exactly like this.
Any questions?
Yeah, well, boss, a couple of the guys and I were thinking that since we're fighting the bat and all that, maybe we're not getting paid as much as we should. I mean, when I was working for the Penguin, we were getting benefits in a 401k.
Well, now you're working for Mr. J, you chowderhead. He'll do what he says and take what he gives and hope it is not a bullet.
Baby, you're the best.
Graphically, I think this game represents the show well. The models in this game do justice to the franchise a lot more than that Tarzan game did, in my opinion. So yeah, as a game adaptation of Batman the Animated Series goes, it definitely goes beyond the bare minimum and into a product I can see people liking. But unfortunately, when it comes to gameplay, well, that's where this game loses me. As the game starts out, I wasn't thinking it was that bad, a bit average, a bit boring, but nothing bad. But as the game kept going, well, we'll get into that. But the problems start off as soon as you start the game. Not because they actually put the credits over the tutorial, which I think is actually a pretty awesome thing to do, but when you first gain control of the Dark Knight, you'll notice that he has to tiptoe for a second before he fully takes off. Nothing too terrible, being honest, but it just feels awkward trying to get a run in, but oh, gotta stretch first. But if you want to get into how awkward this game can get, it's in the actual combat. Batman Vengeance is a platformer beat-em-up game, and sadly a beat-em-up game in an awkward period of its lifetime. In the early to mid-90s, beat-em-ups ruled arcades alongside its cousin, the fighting game. As fun quarter munchers where you and usually 3 other friends join forces to mow down a line of mooks with your awesome abilities, and sometimes getting that same experience on your home console with series like Final Fight and Streets of Rage, what a wonderful chaotic period of time in gaming. But as the mid-90s rolled into the late 90s and the video game world turned to 3D, the beat-em-ups began to dry up. Is it because no developer found a way to take beat-em-ups into the third dimension, or were there just so many beat-em-ups in the past that it kind of made this genre feel a bit generic? I don't know, but when one of the few notable games of this era, Fighting Force, is well known as a game that developer Core Design tried to sell to Sega as a Streets of Rage sequel that Sega declined due to them making their own, that obviously never came to be, and on top of that, considered pretty mediocre, is honestly everything that needs to be said. Batman Vengeance is clearly a game of that time period that had no clue on how to bring beat-em-ups properly into 3D. So what happens is you fight 1 to 3 enemies at a time in a given area, and all the action is in the style of a fighting game, with blocking and dodging attacks. Now this form of action in a beat-em-up just slows things down, and it's just annoying how the mooks tend to block often, leaving the action at a snail's pace. And when you finally knock one down, they just can't dissolve away like any other beat-em-up. No, in this game you gotta handcuff them after defeat or else they'll regenerate health and get back up. Now I get it. Batman's shtick is that he's a crime-fighting independent detective who is also a man of the law. So him handcuffing enemies after he takes care of them is understandable to the character. But as a gameplay element, it's just really stupid. Not only does it break the pace, not only is it awkward finding the right position to actually handcuff them, but more importantly, you only have a limited amount of these handcuffs, which makes this stupid gimmick even stupider. Oops, ran out of handcuffs while trying to find where I need to go next, and now these mooks are up and at him trying to pummel the stuffing out of me, and I just can't find the exit! One of the biggest frustrations regarding these handcuffs is in episode 2, where you're given no handcuffs to start the mission with. So you go through the whole level beating down mooks and then moving on, because what else can you do? And then you get to this part where Mr. Freeze leaves you and his minions to duke it out. So you beat them up and try to find the way to progress, but nothing's working. You see if there's some button to press, maybe something you can hit with your batarang, but nothing works, and it's not too long before the goons come back to life and impede your progress. So I had to look it up. It's here where they finally give you some handcuffs in this box to subdue them, and now you can move on. Way to be fucking obvious. And that's not where the annoyance ends. This game absolutely loves stopping to throw cutscenes at you. And not the really good pre-rendered cutscenes. No, I'm talking about the in-game cutscenes that look, well...
Batman, you saved my little booby trap. I don't know how I could ever thank you. You blind as your namesake, do-gooder moron. Say goodnight, Batsy.
Careful, Harley. You'll kill him. But nothing. You're my hench-wench. You catch him, I kill him. Less wench, more hench, you molly-coddling little twit. Nobody kills the bat but me. Like so.
Like we're talking Sonic Adventure 1 levels of badly made and awkwardly shot cutscenes. Like, look at this scene. Yeah, could you, like, look at each other like you're having a conversation? On top of the mediocre beat-em-up of all of it, Vengence for some reason needs to have one of the strangest camera control I've ever seen in a game of this period. While the camera itself is fine, I don't have much problems with it, but when it comes to those times where I do want to control the camera, what do I get by moving the C-stick? You get the camera going straight behind Batman himself, not to where I want to position it to get a better angle. Yes, I don't get it either. Maybe if this was a game on PS1, an early game for PS1, I totally get it. But as a game released on all three of the major 6th generation consoles, all of which had a second control stick mainly used for camera control, this makes zero sense to me. But it wasn't a huge deal breaker for me since reorganizing the camera wasn't too hard. Except for this one moment. Right here where I had to stand on some gargoyle statue to get some extra height so you can glide to the building down below. Not too big of an issue, right? Well, for some reason, this specific gargoyle statue was so fickle about where to actually stand that I ended up falling off it again, and again, and again. Now this looks like a job for changing the position of the camera. Oh wait, I can't because for whatever reason, the camera resets itself back in place after messing with the camera controls. Oops. Jeez, after all this, I can't say I thought Batman Vengeance was bad. Batman Vengeance is just a mediocre beat-em-up with a lot of issues that get on my nerves. But it's not terrible. As a product of the time it was released in, and with a solid cutscene and models, I can understand the reception it did receive by the critics. And maybe in this day and age, it can be a good enough little game for any fan of Batman the Animated Series. Unfortunately, this game isn't just a beat-em-up. Yes, Batman Vengeance had to be one of those games where if the mainline game is mediocre and forgettable, then instead of polishing it and making it the best they can, just throw in a bunch of other mediocre gameplay in it to bad time and make it even worse. Like this shoot-em-up section in the Batwing. I call it a poor man's Star Fox, but that's actually insulting to those poor men's Star Foxes. When the tedious, boring, and pointless plane sections of Sonic Adventure 1 are more fun than your 3D shoot-em-up, you failed big time. What's the most important aspect of any shoot-em-up? Actually feeling like you're causing damage. And anytime you shoot on Mr. Freeze's helicopter, it just puts up this blue ring. Like, am I causing any damage? Is this just a force field? I don't get it. So instead of actually shooting down Mr. Freeze, you're avoiding collision in Gotham where even running into a highway sign gives you a game over. Then you find some peace to finally shoot down the man and get on with the game. So I guess the blue ring does signify you made a hit? I don't know, this mode sucks. But how could it possibly get worse? Oh, I know. How about a driving section that makes no sense whatsoever? Actually, before I get into this, the level before this driving section was already starting to annoy me. Here Poison Ivy's plant goons hijack this train or whatever, and you gotta get through all the cars that shut off the electrical lock to rescue Batgirl, all while dealing with the green sacks of photosynthesis. And it's strange how on top of the cars, Batman can easily take them down with his fists, yet in the cars, get any close to them and they stop you before you can get any farther. So you need to pull up your weapon selection constantly to pull out the Electro Batarang, to one-hit kill them, and then close it to get a move on again, and again, and again. And then after all that, it's followed by this car chase, and I'll be honest, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. The car will make turns, and I don't know if I haven't got the right timing, or I need to be in a specific lane, or if I'm not just fast enough, but I always seem to fail these turns, prompting Batman to just give up. Really, Batman? You're just gonna give up? And it got old constantly replaying the same 10 seconds just to fail over and over and over again, questioning what the hell I did wrong. Isn't this what you want in a Batman game? Dodging cars and buildings? Don't be shocked, but this was the final straw. And you want to know the worst part? Those were the only times they showed up in the game. Yes, I looked it up. They programmed a terrible plane and driving section just to only use it once in the whole game. I honestly can't decide if I was spared of even more terrible levels, or I should criticize the lack of purpose as to why they're even in the game. And I'm gonna say both. Everything about Batman Vengeance feels half-baked and overall a mediocre experience I don't recommend. Even saving the game sucks. You can't just ask me to save after finishing a level. I gotta go to the main menu to take care of it? Jeez. And it's weird. I thought I would like Vengence more compared to that Tarzan game, but at the very least, that Tarzan game had the river surfing. Batman just had nothing. It is a game that has not aged well at all, and with all the better beat-em-ups or hack and slashes to be precise following it, such as Devil May Cry from the same year, meant there were even more reasons to ignore Batman Vengeance. And of course the Batman Arkham games that eventually came out speak for themselves. But at the same time, it did receive some good reviews, and I'm guessing sold well enough that a sequel was made 2 years later, again made by Ubisoft Montreal. And after enough time has passed, I'm willing to give it the benefit of a doubt of it being a much better game than the first one when I eventually get around to reviewing it. But of course, that is a review for another day. And today I say, skip Batman.